May 11th, 2021, Town of Chincoteague Planning Commission meeting to order. I ask you all to stand for the invocation and pledge of allegiance. Heavenly Father, we pray that your presence tonight will help us and guide us. We pray that you will continue to protect those who serve and protect us. Take care of this beautiful island that we live in, and do all those things that we would make us more acceptable. Pray for our lost families, those particularly in the last few months that we've lost here on Chincoteague. Bless them, take care of those families. And again, guide us in this meeting tonight. We ask all these things in your most precious name, in the name of Jesus. Thank you. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I thank you all for coming. Do we have any public participation at this point in time?
No, sir, we do not have anybody signed up.
Okay, so I would go to the agenda review. Is there any question about our agenda, any changes? Ask for approval.
I move that we approve the minutes as written.
I'll second.
I have approval on the agenda. Motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So moved. First item on the agenda is approval of the April 13th, 2021 regular meeting minutes. Any changes or corrections? Hearing none, I'd ask for approval of those minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So moved, I thank you. Item 2, detached quarters, Town of Chincoteague. We had been presented this request from Mr. Landsberger 2 months ago, and we had more specific information provided to us last month. And I'll open the floor at this point in time. Mike, anything changed since we received this request?
No, sir.
Okay. Members of the commission? Molly? None?
My opinion?
Yes, please.
The opinion is, I think that it should stay like it is, where people, they come and they request something. When you build something in the backyard and there's no longer the need that it is for, and it's a permanent solution, it can be used, rented out, or anything. That's 2 uses on the same piece of property. And I think if we do it, we're going to open up a whole kettle of worms.
The secondary use of property has been an issue. I know it's come before the Board of Zoning Appeals several different times, in different formats and different ways. I agree that the rationale that on this particular request, and I think we all immediately felt as though the original, the request that generated this request was more than something that the town could accept. But again, I have concerns from a standpoint of enforcement after the fact in some cases. It's you know, the intent is always well-meaning in the beginning, but the consequences become something that you have to deal with after the fact, when those well-meaning needs and issues are resolved. So I have some concerns relevant to changing the existing zoning. There is the ability to request a conditional use and/or an appeal to zoning. So there is avenues to accomplish the the request that, beyond changing our zoning code. Bob?
Yeah, and looking at the list of concerns from other towns and stuff that have done something similar, this is one of the big ones. And, you know, I've looked at several ways in which they've gone through and tried to remediate this. The most popular ones seem to be that the residents either had to be related to the residents in the primary unit or working for them. And that seemed to be pretty prevalent. The other one was using parking to go through and restrict. And so we might want to consider something like that, some language to that, although I think what's in there now is fairly straightforward. I see the enforcement issue. How are you gonna go through and enforce this thing? But the language is pretty good, and maybe it needs to be beefed up. But, you know, the reality is, you know, if you build an ADU for a relative, it's probably gonna be transient. You know, if they use it for 15 years, you're blessed by God, you know, in most cases. So what are you gonna do with it when the need is gone?
Well, the state code provides, several years ago, there was a portion of the state code that was modified that provided for medical facilities, encouraged it really, to be provided in addition to the main dwelling for the period of time that those medical needs were needed. And probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, the zoning board heard a request for a trailer to be placed on a property for the duration of time that the medical needs were there for the parent. At which time, of course, when those needs were no longer needed, the trailer was to be removed. So that again, the vehicle's there to accomplish it without, at this point in time, changing the zoning code, I guess. So, and I feel at this point that, Mr. Landsberg, would you like to make a comment?
I have two questions. First of all, if you worry about enforcement, the definition of the zoning is single-family dwelling. Okay? If I want to rent out a house and have 14 families living in there, how are you going to enforce it? How do you enforce that now? You have no way to enforce it. The only difference between what I've suggested and what you have is that there's not a physical connection between the two buildings. I have a picture from Cape Charles. There's a house and another house, and they built a wall in front of it with a door. If I connect the building that I have next door to my building with a roof, it's legal.
Right.
If I don't have that roof, I have to pay you $1,500 and go through a three-month application. So what you're telling me is that if I have a medical need, you're going to want $1,500 and you're going to want me to wait 3 months to fill that need. I just don't see how the town is being responsive to the needs of changing populations of kids that are now living at home, of what are called granny flats, and basically that you're denying people the right to have a single-family dwelling. Your zone shouldn't be single-family dwelling. According to what your zoning is, it's single-building dwelling. And I believe that you're denying property owners the right to use their property by the way your zoning law is written. And I intend to pursue it.
So I have a question, if I could.
Sure.
So in a situation like this in the past, where someone has asked for a conditional use for a situation like this, has one ever been turned down for a medical reason that anybody knows of?
No.
No, but not everybody can afford $1,500.
So here's my next point. Would it be possible to take a look at, in the case of a medical condition, that the fee be waived?
That's certainly, it's feasible.
As long
Again,
as-
though,
Is there anything built into that where it can be addressed on an as-needed basis, and each individual's case can be considered.
Sure. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That would be
So.
the methodology.
Right, that's not in there
Because as
now.
far as the amount of time, I mean, regardless if you're going through a conditional use or you're going through a building permit, whatever you're doing, by the time you get all the paperwork done and all that type of thing, it's 2 or 3 months anyway. You know, by the time you get through that process. So, you know, if we could do something with the fee, you know, for those type of situations, it would certainly level the playing field for what, you know, David is asking for, or what he's presented.
Would you keep the zoning the same where it wouldn't be a permanent place? It would be like
Exactly.
a trailer or a tiny
Exactly.
home or something like that that can be removed
I
afterwards?
personally feel in a tourism area like this that could very easily get mispurposed beyond what we're looking for here. Because we're looking for a medical need here.
You also realize that there are multiple instances of people who've renovated their homes to include apartments for children or for elderly, that they've done it within their homes, and you know about some of them, and you know some of them haven't been permitted, and they're not legal. They're just there.
Yeah, but David, that doesn't make it right. And the reality,
So what I'm saying is, why not make it so that it can be right?
well, the reality of it is, how many of these requests have been presented to the town? You know, is it a dire need at this point in time? Or is this a case-by-case basis that we could address?
I think it's a need that's gonna be increased, and I think that you don't know how many have been done. I know of 3 or 4, and I'm sure you don't know. Where
That could
people
be.
just renovated the back end of their house, put a little apartment in, and didn't tell anybody. Because of this law.
There are people who circumvent the building code
I understand.
daily. I mean,
And I didn't, my place,
I understand.
You've been to my place.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I've been up there.
And you've been there.
Yeah.
That is not,
It's,
that's probably.
that's not the issue. That was not the issue at all.
Okay, so if I apply for a permit to connect the 2 buildings with a roof, what happens?
You'd be granted the permit. As long as I'm met building code.
You know, the setback from the property lines.
You'd have a bigger house. I mean, I did the same thing with additions to my original home.
Your R1, so you have to meet your 35 side yard, 35 years.
As long as you met all the conditions.
Got it?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But isn't it kind of silly to make someone do that?
I don't think you're making somebody do that. If, we didn't make you,
Well, if I want that bedroom to be part of my house,
Right.
when I sell the house, I have to connect it.
that's on you.
Otherwise, when I sell the house, that's no longer a bedroom.
When you sell that house, that's a separate building. Without
As
doing
it is now.
anything,
Unless I connect it.
unless you connect it. So the condition that exists right now stands, but when you sell it, that's a separate building. That condition no longer exists.
So the zoning is not really single-family residence, it's single building, single-family residence.
It's, you could phrase it that way.
And I-
But the reality too, there's another reality. We have something in the neighborhood of 1,500 to 2,000 rental properties.
Right.
They can all fill.
That conceivably, not all in resident 1 or residence 2, but conceivably could use the same premise that, oh, okay, we'll put up, you know, it's my property. Yeah, I rent it, but I want my kids to be able to stay here. And
Within the ordinance that I suggested, there is very clear guidance. It's very clear that it has to be one family or one family plus a domestic help. Very clear language. There's much clearer language in that ordinance than in the regular ordinance. I can rent my house to 4 families.
but once that property is sold,
I understand.
then it's out the window. You know, we're back to
But
square
I'm saying,
one.
if I have a single family, single residence, single building, and I rent that to 4 families,
Right.
the zoning says single family. How are you gonna enforce the fact that they're not 4 families?
Well, it's almost like the way we do the rental properties today, where it says 6 occupants,
Right.
and there's 7 cars outside, and you wonder, well, wait a minute, something's wrong here. You know, it's not an easy subject.
No, and especially since we have cottages all over the place,
Right,
and houses with cottages in the back. There
and we're gonna have more.
300 or 400 cottages
Yeah,
all over.
yeah. So,
The, I don't know, it seems, all 4 residential zones are listed in this. And, you know, when I think about it, like R3 or so, if someone does it, is it such a big deal, right? I mean, because there's rental properties in R3 and transient properties in R3, right?
right.
So if it,
Actually, there's rental properties in R1.
really? Oh, there's single family.
Single-family homes.
Yeah. And that's
Every-
fine.
every zone has
That
a-
makes sense, that makes sense.
Yep.
But I think the density and noise issues and stuff like that would be predominantly felt in R1, and wouldn't bother people so much in R3 and R4, maybe even R2.
I
Right?
think if you look at your R2, you've got your 12,000 required area. Then if you want to add second use, it's 5,000 additional square feet. If you go to your R3 and your R4, it's 10.5, with additional 3,000 for each additional use. So you could have if you've got your 13.5, you could have, as long as you meet your setbacks, you could have a single-family dwelling and then a cottage on the same parcel.
What am I over, right?
You are R1, and R1 don't have no, it's just for single families,
Most restrictive.
most restricted.
Well, what's the commission's recommendation at this point in time? Do we need further discussion on it, or clarification?
I mean, at present, to at least give us a workaround to make things a little easier, I would make a motion that, you know, in times of medical need, when somebody does ask for conditional use, that we do waive the $1,500 fee, to help expedite and ease the burden of that. And then, of course, use as much expediency as we can to have the matter considered and voted on. But that would be my recommendation for now, until we could possibly do further investigation. At least it would be something for now, to help the situation.
Would you also say that the building or trailer or whatever has to be
Yes,
removed?
yeah, and I'm sorry, I apologize. I totally agree with that, yes. Once the need has been met.
That would be a recommendation that we would forward to our town council.
Mhm.
Does everyone understand what the proposal that Councilman McCombs present?
Yeah, the only thing that concerns me is what type of trailer would you actually pull onto a piece of property that would be accessible for an elderly person? You have your parents come to live with you or whatever.
They would probably have to have a ramp and stuff to it.
Mhm.
What trailers have doors that are actually handicap accessible and stuff like that? I mean, you're gonna make people add on to their houses, and you're gonna change the look of their whole house
Right.
just for this purpose. That's the only thing that bothers me, but I don't know what you can actually use that can help an elderly person.
Yeah.
Or a handicapped person. Say you got somebody in your family that's handicapped.
If you have a handicap house, you're gonna have to have a ramp and things put on the house.
Well,
So if you have a trailer or something, you have a ramp put on that.
Not all handicaps require a ramp in today's world with dementia and things of that nature. People are mobile from the standpoint, but again, you want to cover all bases.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, let's bear in mind that the vast majority of this island is in a flood zone.
Yeah.
Yes,
We're required not only to elevate the base flood elevation, but we have a
Flood elevation for
freeboard
the
ordinance
unit.
which requires 2 foot above base flood elevation. So
Right.
just about anywhere you go, you're not going to be building a grade, and this will apply to any structure that's built, including a detached quarters. So it's very possible that any detached quarters that are built are going to be 3, 4, even 5 feet off the existing grade, which requires a 30, 40, or 50-foot ramp in order to access them. And that's going to be with any building regardless of what's decided here tonight. That's a building code issue that we don't have control of.
In the sense that the control is that it's a requirement.
It's a building
It's
code
a,
requirement
it's a
by the
building
state.
code.
Yes, sir.
That's understood. Yeah, I personally have a 40-foot ramp.
Yeah.
We'll come back again. Mr. McCone, would you restate that again for clarity?
So for now, until we can investigate or move on this further, I would suggest waiving the conditional use fee for those that apply with a medical reason, with the caveat that whatever is put in place be removed once that need has been met. And then, of course, any expediency that we could put on the case to get it, you know, heard and considered to speed up that process as well.
This,
You should not put in the word removed.
Yeah.
It should not be used for that purpose. I'm not gonna tear down my building after, it'll go back to being an office or whatever it was, so I'm not gonna remove.
your building would not qualify under this.
So how about I change that? Anything that would,
I had to get a special use permit for medical reasons in order to have my daughter live there during the pandemic.
You could simply say the use will revert to the original
The use will
use.
there you go.
But you already have that. Say it again?
The use would, instead of giving a special use,
Right.
the use of the special use would be over once the need is over.
Right.
And it would revert to the
Yeah.
original use.
Right.
Which is.
That would be the understanding.
At least that's a compromise.
But whatever this applies does not apply to you. You already have
Right.
yours, so, yeah. Okay.
I got my $1,500
I don't have a problem with it.
Well, you got one vote here already, so we'll see. Any further discussion? I'll call for a vote on the motion made. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
But
Opposed?
I want to clarify, we are going to keep this open and revisit
Yes.
it. Okay.
Yes.
Aye.
This will buy some time.
I don't, having said that, I don't think this is a dead issue per se. I think it's something that probably over the next couple of months, we could look at it in a different light or a different sense. In particular, we're addressing the medical issues. But I agree with Mr. Landsberger relevant to the secondary uses of homes with parental issues. Those needs are going to increase just because the population is reaching a longer life longevity. So, okay. Item number 3 on our agenda is the drainage ordinance discussion. Mr. Landsberger, thanks again for your input. I understand everyone has a copy of a proposal in front of them.
It's on the screen as well. It is on the screen. as
And
well.
it's on the screen? Great. It'd like easier. Since this is brand new, can we just go through it once?
Yes.
Mhm.
Would you like me to go?
Would you, Mike?
Sure.
I know Mike and Mark have,
And let me stress before we start, that this is merely a tool to start the conversation.
Mhm.
That is by no means the way we'd like to see it in its final form. It's here for you to start a conversation and just to let you know what Mark and I envision is
the potential.
And there should be a few other things attached to this, such as DMPs, or best management practice structures, and that sort of thing, examples of those. Mark and I have been working on this whenever we got a chance, and we recently came up with this. The statement of purpose, the ordinance is intended to regulate the filling of land. Regulations are needed because the filling of land may pose significant land use problems, including environmentally damaging changes in topography, threat to desirable land use patterns and/or safety or nuisance hazards. And I will say again that the nuisance ordinance does contain a few paragraphs which directly relate to filling of land. No building shall be erected on any land, and no change shall be made in any existing contours of any land, including any change in the course, width, or elevation of any natural or other drainage channel in any manner that will obstruct, interfere with, or substantially change the drainage from such land to the detriment of neighboring lands. We thought that was a fairly good opening statement to the statement purpose. We defined fill material as earth material, including topsoil. There is some allowance for gravel, rock, and stone to the limit of 10%, I believe, is what we said in that. We discussed last time a threshold for a permit. And one of the things that we desperately need in the town office, when somebody builds a piece of property, we do not always know about it, nor do we have jurisdiction over it. Unless they reach the 10,000 square foot threshold for the county of Accomack, we would not necessarily know that they're filling a property, and they're not doing anything illegal. The idea here is for the town to know about it, at least get to take a look at it, and see whether the operation that is commenced is going to be affecting the neighbors adversely. So we've tried to come up with a couple of numbers for a threshold, and what we came up with was a fill and grading permit shall be required of any fill operation on which more than 24 cubic yards of material is deposited, or in which more than 2,600 square feet of land is disturbed. And we felt that the volume of fill as well as the square footage of land, the area of land disturbed, was important to include both of those. And we didn't arrive at those numbers haphazardly. If you do the math, 24 cubic yards of fill will fill 2,600 square feet of property to about 3 inches. And we thought if you're just leveling up your yard just to get the dips out of it, 3 inches of fill would be about what you need to level up with. So we didn't want to affect anyone who was doing minor fill operations. So when you go over either of those, we want to know about it. Not that's anything that you're going to be required to do that's out of the ordinary, but we'd like you to get a permit. We'd like Mark to have a chance to go out and take a look at it before and after, so that we see that you've graded it properly and you're not running water off on your neighbor. Or what you've done is fill your property so that your neighbor's not running water off on you. And that you use best management practices in order to make it okay. Work exempt from the permit. If you're ordering topsoil for plants and things like that, we're going to exempt that, unless you're ordering 500 loads of it or something like that, which I don't think anybody would make money, considering the price of it. And if you've already got a building permit to construct a building, we're not going to make you get a fill permit if the bill is associated with the building itself. So if you're going to, if the contractor's going to have to build a new house and has to build a property, the filling part of it will be part of the building permit. So we're not going to duplicate our efforts here. Application permits will be through the town building and zoning administrator naturally. We're going to require some information. A legal description of the property, which is usually the lot number, or if it's a structure already there, it'll be the nominal address. Description and the extent and nature of the proposed operation, including the approximate amount of fill. That's important, as we've given you numbers of how much the threshold for our permit is. And the square footage of land to be filled, again, that's a minimal threshold for us. And the exact nature of the materials the fill is composed of. Are you filling with, most people fill with what we call fill dirt. It's a combination of sand and clay. You can fill with sand, you can fill with topsoil. We're going to allow you to put so much material of another nature in concrete or stone or cobbles. Later on, we'll see that there's some things that we will not allow in there. Landowner, if the applicant is not the landowner, then we want an agreement between the landowner and the applicant. This is all basic stuff. Again, all of this is subject to your approval and discussion. Consideration of the permit approval, Mark will consider a permit shall not be granted unless the county zoning administrator is able to find that the application is consistent with public health, safety, and welfare. Very basic statement. No application will be granted on the basis that the building and zoning administrator finds that the granting of the application because of such condition or conditions would tend to injuriously affect public health, safety, or welfare, or make worse an already unsatisfactory situation. There goes, if you're already running water off your neighbor, we're certainly not going to let you make it worse. Appeal of decision. Right now, we see this as a zoning permit primarily, unless it's associated with an existing building permit. So we see the BZA being able to grant relief from the building administrator's decision. That doesn't have to be there. In fact, I do want to consult an attorney to make sure that it's actually legal, because BZA, as you know, is appointed by the judge. They have a specific
Right.
Set of instructions that they have to abide by. So we don't want to do something here that's not going to be legal. If in fact it is not legal to have BZA settle this appeal, then we would come back and probably to the planning commission, since the planning commission is already looking at subdivisions and sort of thing like that. Again, rules and regulations are pretty simple. Finished grade of land, which is to be built, shall not be done in such a manner as to cause water to stand or accumulate, or to result in a place of danger or any nuisance to public health or safety, going back to our nuisance ordinance. Use of approved best management practices, or BMPs, shall be required to prevent stormwater runoff from adversely affecting adjacent properties. BMPs are basically a swale, a French drain. It could be as simple as, and I know one instance on the island where the owner called me, the neighboring property, poured a concrete driveway completely over and stopped at the property line, and it's graded toward the neighbor. So all the runoff is not being absorbed in the ground, it is running off of the neighbor's property. So BMP in that instance may be a curb at the end of the driveway to collect the water to the street rather than its neighbor. So BMPs can take the form of many different structures. We'll have a list of commonly most used BMPs, which the county uses the same thing in their stormwater management plan. Some of them get to be very complicated. We don't intend to suggest those. Somebody wants to hire an engineer to do it, we're all for it. It's at their cost. But the object here was to make this simple enough that the homeowner could do it, or contractor could do it without consulting professional engineers and spending thousands of dollars to do so. We didn't want to make it more cumbersome. We just wanted to try to solve the problem. Enforcement, it gives Mark, building administrator, the right to inspect the property, to enter the property to inspect it, and to call out somebody when they've not done it properly or per their existing plan. We have the right to suspend the permit. And again, the penalty, we'll have to check with the attorney to make sure that the penalty is even legal. Severability, you see that in most contracts, and effective date reports is all up to interpretation by the schedule of how this is ever finally suggested or proposed to council. And with that, this is about as simple as we can see this thing taking. We will have some BMPs. Mark has downloaded some very good pictures. We found one municipality that has pictures on their website, and under the caption under the picture says, "This is when the property owners agree," and the swale is divided by the property line. And you see a swale all the way to one side, and the property owners don't agree. Yeah, so it is a very common problem, and apparently not a very common solution. So with that, I'll leave this for your discussion, and we'll answer any questions.
My opening comment today is well thought out. And it is, to a great degree, simplistic. The only reaction that I heard prior, or as a result of our first conversations here in the plan was the permit question. You know, that'll be a sensitive issue, if you will. I don't, you know, if we could make the cost somewhat
Marginal.
marginal is a good word. Not too expensive is really good.
And again, it's, like I said, we eliminated the permit, and even the permit, if you've
Yeah.
already got a building permit, so that pretty much lets any contractor out of it.
That's great.
And it's not our intention to make money on this, but just to give the building administrator a look to make sure that we're not doing something that's going to harm the neighbor. That's the only intent of this.
I think that underscores the real reason why this came to fruition. That wasn't a case of the policing of it, but was to reduce the impact on other people. It's not to stop somebody from improving their property or doing the things that they feel they have a right to do, but it's been the ongoing impact on others. And it's just like the exit sign or the fire sign. You know. If people are not going to address that portion of it, then somebody else has to come forward and say, hey, wait a minute, guys. Yeah, I'm sorry, Commissioners?
Fine to me. I'd feel more comfortable with a list of acceptable
Of the
B&Bs.
B&Bs?
Something where people know where to go. Because, I mean, putting in a pipe somewhere isn't a B&P.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be, but it, you know, it may not be. So having a list of, people need to be able to look at something and say, hey, I could put in permeable pavers instead of concreting my drive. They need to know that before they go and start talking to people.
Absolutely, and we do intend to have a whole list of PMPs, and there are more being developed all the time.
Right.
It is not our intention to tell you what you must use,
Right.
but to give you an option of you telling us how you want to deal with the problem and or the potential problem. And if you can say, if you can convince Mark that, hey, this is how I intend to deal with it, and it looks good, you know, then we're good with that.
Right?
Sounds good.
I agree.
Right? So we'll wait to get some additional feedback relevant to some of the questions that Mike has raised, and Mark will address them, and this will be on our agenda for next month. Okay?
Yes, sir.
And thank you both for pursuing this. Item number 4 is just a discussion. I asked Mark to put this on. We have completed the process as far as the planning commission goes. Bob has presented us tonight with our hard drives, which are the copies of the approved plan. We want to have council have the opportunity to look at it. And, I understand from Mike, not all council members had hard drives, so did we get enough spares made so each can be provided with?
No, sir, the council members I spoke with don't remember receiving any hard drives, or, I'm sorry, flash drives. I can order some, and we'll have some made for them.
Great.
The other option is to post it to the website. Unfortunately, I did put a PDF of the full document on here, so the Word file is quite large.
Can we do both? Can we get the PDF to the website? But also get-
Mike said that he.
Yeah, get the
he
flash
could do-
drives.
Yeah, best place is to put it on the
Yeah.
website.
And relevant
PDF.
to the comprehensive plan, Bob was on this phone call with, there's a group called the RAFT Group, which is a resiliency action force that's being directed under the auspices of William and Mary and VIMS and some other of our folks in the academic world. Throughout the state, the issue of resiliency and the impacts of not having addressed it have become quite an issue lately. In fact, the state budget has quite a few dollars now been dumped into the coffers for fighting tidal change and impacts of flooding and the impacts of erosion and so forth and so on. But it was interesting on this, the conference call that we were on, that the individual, Sharon Alexander, who happens to be with the Accomack Northampton Planning Commission, of which Accomack and Northampton were one of the first folks who really got deeply involved with the raft concept a couple of years ago. And Bob and I and Arthur, Jim West at the time, and were members of sort of an ad hoc committee for the town. We scored, Chicotee scored pretty good on their scoring surveys. And Sharon made this conference call was directed to communities, towns, Richmond, Alexander, and places like that, encouraging them to get the resiliency concepts into their comprehensive plans, so that when the subject is in the comprehensive plan, the local legislator groups, be it council, be it supervisors, be it town mayors, they can legally address that issue. If there's no concept that's been addressed in the comprehensive plan and it's just a wish list, it has a harder time getting anything done. The nice part that I felt was great was Sharon made the observation that, thanks to Bob and you folks, in our comprehensive plan, it's mentioned 60 times. But just the word resiliency or the concept of resiliency. And my hat's off to the group, Bob in particular, but to all of us who contributed to that. You know, that's an atta-girl, atta-boy. So thanks again. And I asked you earlier in the year when we first came together, were there any projects that you might think we should start addressing? In years past, we always had a project list, goals, objectives, and so forth, and I haven't received any yet, but at our next meeting, I'll provide Mark with a list of some ideas. And please, if you have any thoughts on those issues, please present them prior to that. Get them to me or get them to Mark. And besides the things that may come to us from council, there's a lot of issues that the council may be too busy or too focused on the quote the hit list at any given moment. But there's a lot of stuff that sits out there sort of in the gray area that could come and bite the town. And whatever we can do to offset the negatives of that, or whatever we can do to improve situations that we may see, I think it's the Planning Commission's obligation to at least look at it and make suggestions. Again, it's just suggestions that we would make to council. You know, and that's our true Planning Commission role. So think about it. Having said that, Commission members, Dave?
Good.
You keep them busy?
Yes.
Too busy. Bob, thanks again.
I'm good. Yep.
Anything?
I'm
Bill?
good, thank you.
Molly? Mike?
Good for me.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion, second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So moved. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Lady.